Hey, welcome to the Commerce Hero live stream. Today, I am joined by my good friend, Mark Lewis,
Hey,
out in Miami. Is that where you are? Miami,
Miami
South
Beach.
Florida?
Yes, yes, sir.
Miami Beach. Oh my gosh, I don't even have my friggin' headset
You
plugged
got
in.
to
What's
get the
going on
the
here?
iPhone headset going.
Yeah, you got to do the iPhone headset. So I'm here with Mark, and Mark owns an agency. So Mark, introduce yourself and talk a little bit about some of the topics we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah. So I'm Mark Lewis. I am the CEO, whatever titles you want to call, uh, of Natalico, which was started as me as just kind of a freelancer, and then now is kind of turned into a little bit of an agency who specializes primarily in Magento and a little bit of Shopify, a little bit of WordPress. And yeah, and so we're kind of, sounds like we're going to be talking about kind of my journey from like just starting out as a solo freelance developer and then, where I'm at now and kind of, kind of some of the structures that put in place to survive for like, 5 or 6 years as a freelancer.
Awesome, awesome. By the way, shout out to Alan McGregor who's in the stream. By the way, he said that you win the best best background,
Yeah.
best webinar background so far. So you live right on the beach, right?
Yes, yes. Here, maybe
Dude,
you can see the beach behind me. I don't know.
so baller.
Back there somewhere.
That's fantastic. And you moved from North Carolina down there recently?
Yep, about a year ago. Yeah, I just really wanted to be closer to Philip Jackson. That was what it was.
As one does, as one does.
Wanted to join the South Florida meetup here.
Right, right. Have you been going to that?
Uh, we haven't met a ton of times, but it's been cool. I mean, I think it is like one of the most active Magento meetups. So it's cool.
It does, yeah, it does seem like it, which you wouldn't necessarily expect South Florida to be like the hot. You'd think maybe LA would be the hot spot or Austin, but
Mm-hmm.
you guys are giving us all a run for our money with
Yeah.
that. So
You have to travel a little. Like South Florida is so spread out that like Philip's over or up in West Palm Beach, which is like an hour and a half north, and so the meetups will be up there, and Miami people are expected to go up there. Sometimes they'll get a little closer to
right.
like Ollie from Imagination Media, who's in like Hollandale Beach.
Got it, got it. How far is Miami from West Palm Beach?
I think it's about 75 miles, about an hour and a half
Oh,
drive.
oh, dang.
Yeah,
So you drive an hour and a half to go to the.
to the meetup. Yeah, I'm
Oh,
committed.
that's dude. Wow, you're serious. You're not
Very.
messing around.
Mm-mm.
Um, no, that's so cool, man. Actually, it's funny. Me and Philip were talking about my Mage Titans Costa Rica idea, and he was like, "We should do it in South." How about he was like, "Or what if we do it in South Florida?" And
Yeah,
I was like,
pretty
"That could
close.
work. Yeah, that could work."
Yeah, you can
Um,
you can sleep on my couch. We'll do a trade. I'll sleep on your couch during Mage Titans often, and
there we go. All right, we could all crash at your place. There, you heard it here first. Mage Titans
yeah.
Miami is going to be at Mark's place.
Yes, yes.
That's cool, man. So let's see. So we're talking about kind of scaling from being a freelancer to a small agency. I've always been impressed with I feel like I interact with lot of different agencies and things like that. And I feel like you have I just feel like you have because agency life can be kind of hectic. You have clients going crazy all hours of the day. You got crazy deadlines. You're doing fixed bid projects, and you're going crazy. And based on what we've talked about, I feel like first of all, whenever I send people leads, I get an idea of sort of how picky they are. And to me, being picky is a very good thing. Like when somebody's picky about it, that's immediately like a signal to me that that they know what they're doing. And so yeah, I just feel like and even in your email signature, I love how it's like, urgent issues are billed at 2x our normal bill rate or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and like, just little things like that, I think are smart because a lot of times people don't do that. So then they just deal with every urgent thing that comes their way and they get super stressed out. So it seems like you have some things in place to like make your agency run pretty smoothly.
Yeah, there's a lot of things like over time that you develop. In some ways, they feel like coping mechanisms, but I
Right.
think they turn in. You're like, I just can't survive. But yeah, things like the email signature that kind of came out of working with some clients. Different clients have different levels of like what is urgent. Like some clients, if there's like a typo on a product page or something, they'll suddenly like freak out, and that's urgent to them. And that's the kind of thing that's like, I decided a while back that urgent issues, if they're truly urgent, then they lets the client kind of prioritize what's urgent to them. Like, is it worth it to have this like changed immediately? And that's one of those things that's normally if someone emails me and it's a pretty small thing, I can get it done that day. But if someone's like freaking out about it, and it's not really a big deal. If it's something like the checkout's broken, that's a pretty important thing for clients, and I think that's also a big thing for e-commerce, as like e-commerce specific web developer is understanding that urgency, because like if a client's checkout is broken, it's effectively like their doors are closed to their storefront.
Yeah.
And so that's one of those things where if it's urgent, you want to be able to actually respond to that urgently. And if you're always dealing with all the little things that are also urgent, you don't have the space to respond to what's really important.
Right. By the way, we got John Davison here, who is project manager on your team, and he's saying, please stop saying that word. I think he means the word urgent. I think it might be stressing him out a little bit.
Every time we get an email with urgent, it actually like triggers stuff in Zapier. So like we get like a text message and a phone call. So it's literally a trigger word.
Quite literally a trigger word. So you get a text message and a phone call?
Yeah, I had that set up because sometimes you'll get a text message and like you got an Apple Watch and you just get a buzz, and you get a a lot of text messages throughout the day.
Right.
But if a phone call, it just like it makes your watch or your phone like
gets your attention much better.
It's something a little.
Yeah.
You can like set a different ringer for particular phone numbers. So like mine like vibrates like it's like brr, brr, brr. So it really makes me feel like the world is ending.
Right. And so does it do them both at the same time, or does it like do a text message and then wait and then do a phone call?
It does them effectively at the same time, where like the text message is nice because you can just see the kind of a quick content of the email real quick. So you can have a quick assessment of, like, this is really urgent, or why are they sending me this? And then the phone call I think usually comes like a minute later automatically.
Oh, okay.
And then it's like a thing.
Nice. That's cool. Yeah, no, I remember back with MageMail, I had something similar where they had to send an email to urgent@magemail.co, and then that would send me a text message. But yeah, little things, because sometimes people will just, be like urgent and actually it's kind of smarter to put it in the subject line because that's more intuitive for people. But people would send these emails and I'm like, look, I do my emails once a day. And for something urgent, you got to send it here. And just, I don't know, just little things like that, I think are so important. I was talking to somebody recently, well, a little bit unrelated topic, but just about just mental health in general and like how they were just stressed out by their workload. And these types of things, client management, I think can really, really stress people out.
Definitely.
Quite a bit. So I think that's really finesse.
Yeah. I mean, along those lines, like, I try to in general keep a pretty strict like 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 work schedule and not work on the weekends, because my experience has been that when you kind of start letting work encroach into what would be considered your personal life, that it really degrades your work and you ultimately like get less done, but you spread it out over more time. And having the things like the urgent email, urgent subject line can help you like kind of unplug, but still be accessible if there like is truly an emergency. Because I've had experiences where it's like you can unplug, but like it's really hard to relax if you're wondering, like, is the world ending? You know, are my clients all
Is
losing
something burning right
money?
now? Yeah.
Exactly. It's harder to relax then.
Yeah. And then so how many of those pings do you end up getting you on a typical weekend or?
You know, I would say maybe one ping a weekend per month, and then maybe throughout the week, I might get like one urgent email kind of throughout the workday, or maybe after hours in the evening. Um,
Nice. Nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not bad. And if you have another thing along those lines that I've done over the years is kind of get out of the hosting business. Like for a while, I offered to host my clients' websites and, you know, charge $150, $200 a month, that kind of thing.
Right.
But I found it wasn't really worth the support hassle of that, of like downtime issues. So you know, working with like a really good host, you know, like Mage Mojo, or working with them kind of takes a lot of the burden off of you as kind of the agency of not having to truly support the site 24/7.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that kind of mission critical support is just a whole other beast.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody that does DevOps stuff in-house for their agency, and really smart guy. And I was like, wow, I was like fascinated by it. I was like, how do you deal with support? And they're like, well, we don't get more than like 1 or 2 issues a month, and people get paged and stuff like that. And I was like, wow, that's impressive. And I was like, how many sites do you guys host? And he's like, 5, and none of them are complicated. And then, you know, when you control the code for the entire thing, I was like, okay, I could see how that. He's like, yeah, we have a complicated one coming up. So it's like, okay, tell me how that goes. We'll probably get out of the support business pretty quickly.
Yeah. Once you get to like, you know, 20 or more sites or 20 or more clients, like honestly, it could just totally overwhelm you as like, you know, a few developers to have to keep up with that. And then you're like having to deal with the emergency issues on top of the regular like projects that you've, you know, committed to do on a day-to-day basis. So yeah.
Totally. And then you also do you work pretty much exclusively on retainer, or do you do some fixed bid stuff?
All of my clients are either like retainer, like on a monthly kind of set, we're going to do these number of hours a month, or, you know, a little bit of variability from month to month. But yeah, kind of got out of the fixed bid business probably like 2 years ago. I'm just kind of finding that like it's really hard to estimate software development.
Amen to that.
It's hard to estimate clients too, like what a particular client, like working with them, how responsive they'll be, how many like changes back and forth they'll request. And when you're bidding, you're really you're making a bet, and you're hoping that you win, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, you know.
Yeah, it's totally a bet, and it's like you have some degree of certainty based on how similar it is to other projects you've done. You know, maybe if you're lucky, you know, you have like a 30% or like a 70% certainty or something like that, but that's like 30% chance you're going to lose money.
Right.
Which, and you know, one of the things I was very hard, like never do any fixed bids ever, but there are companies that make it work. Like, you know, Phillips company makes it work. They have great margins. And like other companies make it work, you know.
Right.
So but in general, I think that's very much the exception.
I think part of that too, agencies that have a lot more full-time, for them, fixed bids work better and make a lot more sense because they have those staff that are always there, and they kind of need to keep them busy. They're just not accepting any projects whatsoever, or you know, if that their staff is sitting idle, they're making $0. They're losing money. So in those cases, I think, you know, you have to look at like how busy is the company, and kind of manage all those kind of dips and hills and And I think that kind of thing takes a lot more like management and a lot more like executive leadership, which just to be like honest, of my company of just, you know, a handful of people, we'll try to keep it simple. And it's like we all have hours in the day that we can put towards projects, and we're usually pretty much busy. We're not trying to like forecast ahead and be like trying to keep everyone, you know, super busy. That kind of thing.
Right. Is that somebody playing music in the background? I love it. It's like
the
beach. It's like the full-on beach experience. Alan, no. It's kind of dope actually. Alan, everybody in the chat vote on whether you like the background music or not. Alan said time and materials with a not exceed works pretty well versus a straight fixed bid. What do you think about that?
Definitely. And I've used that in some cases when clients are asking for a fixed bid. I'll estimate it out in hours, and I'll say, hey, this is truly what we think it's going to take. If we think that we're going to go over it for any kind of reason, we'll give you, you know, as much heads up as possible and an explanation. You know, usually in those cases, it's because some sort of requirement's changed. And it's easier when you're in time and materials to kind of adapt to changing requirements, which I'm sure you've dealt with clients. That what they want kind of evolves. And it's easier to kind of respond to that and just say, all right, you know, this will just be the estimate just grows a little bit.
Right. By the way, your audio sometimes cuts in and out. It's not too bad, but sometimes it cuts in and out a tiny bit.
Shoot.
Yeah, no worries. Like, so in terms of and then also I think it has like picking clients well, you know, I was talking about being picky and stuff like that. And it's funny, I remember I sent you a lead, and just there's some things in the way the client was communicating. They were like, oh, let's talk over the weekend or whatever. Like, you picked up on some signals and you were like, nah, man, it's not. And I was like, okay. Sorry about that. But yeah, so like, how do you pick clients? Like what makes a good client to you? How do you think about that?
Yeah. Part of it really comes from a gut, like, you know, you were saying with those signals over the weekend, but also referrals. Not really having like a sales team. I'm essentially the sales team or the anti-sales team, and that I'm the one that sits down with potential clients.
That's accurate. The anti-sales team,
right? And like leads come in, and I'm the one that just is like, nope,
just shoots them down.
That's gonna be hard. That's gonna be hard to deal with. Like, what was I saying? How to deal with leads and stuff. I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I keep interrupting you, but I was gonna say, by the way, Alan gave you props on the background music, so he's into that. But like, but yeah, in terms of like picking clients, what makes a good client, what makes a bad client, like, how do you think about that?
Oh yeah. I would say a lot of the best clients come from other clients, people that you've actually worked with that refer you. If someone like a friend of a friend refers you and it's more of a personal reference, for me, those end up being kind of the sketchiest.
Right. I know a guy that does web design.
Exactly. But if I meet people in the hot tub and they're like, I want to get into e-commerce, I'm like, okay.
Can you build me a Facebook page?
Exactly. Those are not the best leads. But when you have the leads that are, I guess you would say they're warm leads, and that someone else has said, oh, I've worked with Metallica, I've worked with Mark and his team, they're good. Those are the people that really, you don't really have to sell to them. It's really, you just kind of give them a little more background about yourself. And from the get-go, there's a lot more trust in those relationships. Otherwise, if you just get kind of, you know, like a cold lead, if someone just stumbles across your website and doesn't know anything about you, those people are, I think, deservingly less trustful of you. You really have to build that kind of trust. And, you know, like with lead to Commerce Hero, I feel like that's kind of somewhere in between. You know that they need Magento. You kind of know their general requirements. But at the same time, they don't have a great reason to trust you because there's a ton of other developers, and they've probably been sold to, over and over.
Yeah, I mean, and like that's kind of my end goal with it, is like every single lead is like this beautiful warm lead where the client is solid, they're not crazy, and they're matched up with like the right person. So that's like the dream. But yeah, it's definitely not quite there yet. And different agencies have a different levels, different appetites for the level of risk they want to take on with the client. Like I know some agencies that are really in strong growth mode. They're growing 100 to 200% every year. And so they're willing to take a risk on a fixed bid project or a client that maybe seems a little demanding, because they're really going for that growth. Whereas like guys like you and other guys, like you're doing very well, but you're not needing to grow at insane levels. Like you're probably growing nice and steady. And it's just a beautiful, like lifestyle business. Some people might call that, right?
Yeah, for sure. You broke up for a second too, but I think that's a big difference between a lot of like really big agencies that have a huge staff they're really trying to keep busy versus a smaller agency that's a little more like dev built from the ground up, and that I think as a Magento developer, you're usually kept pretty busy, and it's more a matter of like trying to scale with your clients, trying to scale with the incoming leads instead of trying to like push sales and marketing first and then be like, all right, we got to figure out a way to hire enough developers to do this. It's more like, oh, we're developers. We just want to use our time to help clients out.
Totally. And so like for somebody that's, let's say, doing some freelance work and maybe they're starting to get a little more work than they can handle, which by the way is basically every freelancer ever that's busy and that's like pretty good. At some point it's like you have one project, all of a sudden you get a second one, it's like can't take that on. So for freelancers, like what would be your advice on when to start thinking about becoming an agency, how to do it, pitfalls to avoid, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, the first thing I would say, and I think you kind of talked about this in one of your Commerce Hero videos, is to try to work with your clients like on an ongoing basis and try to get them a little off of like, hey, can you do this 20-hour project real quick, and then nothing. Try to spread out the work so that you're kind of booking your month, your whole and it's like it doesn't end month to month. So that helps you so that you're not building a big site all of a sudden. You spend all your time on one site on 1 month, and then the next month you have nothing. So you're not as like feast and famine at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you find that you're able to like keep the hours more consistent from a month to month perspective, then you can basically get to the point where it's like, okay, I now as a developer, I have 40 hours of work per week. It could be from 5 clients, it could be from 10 clients. You're like basically like a little bit of a part-time employee for 5 or 10 different companies. Once you're at the point where it's like, all right, I'm maxed out as a developer, then you can start thinking about, okay, when I have a temporary bigger project, how can I maybe work with another developer to help me on something that maybe there are other developers out there that are better at like API integrations. There's obviously like front end versus back end developers. How can I like leverage another type of developer's strengths and versus my weaknesses? So like in my case, I am more of a back end developer. So when I work with other developers, like if I can just hand off the CSS and that kind of thing, and they can handle the front end, that helps me immensely.
That's a really I love that. That's a really great thing. Is the idea of like Because I think the way some people approach it is like, I have this huge project that I can't handle, and let me bring somebody on to try and make it work. Where like that, I think that's a pretty risky way to approach it, because if it's already something that you can't handle on your own, and then you're bringing somebody else into the picture that you know, who knows how well they're going to work out, who knows how good you are at managing all those kind of variables, versus like, hey, before you even start to subcontract, like make your work life more even, stable, routine, get people onto monthly retainers, get off of the up and down cycle for yourself. And then as you start to get surplus coming in, that's just so much easier to plug somebody into.
Totally. Yeah. And it really, it helps you scale, I think, in a much more sustainable way, and less of like, okay, we had like a busy quarter or something, and then wait, there's no work to do. And then you have, you know, fixed expenses, you have office space, and but then even
Beachside property.
Exactly. Yeah. You have to invest in real estate and that kind of stuff.
But no, yeah, that's such a good point. I think a lot of people overextend themselves. And then also, like you're saying, the relationship with your subcontractors is important. If you just have one project this month and then nothing the next month, you know, they're not as interested, versus you have a steady number of hours per month that is the right amount of hours for them. And that can steadily increase. That's super attractive for freelancers.
Definitely. And that's something like, I think I've gotten clients from bigger agencies that tend to subcontract for a lot of one-off projects, for a lot of builds. And when that happens, just to be honest, I think the quality of work can go down a lot. And when you're able to be a lot more consistent, I think the quality of your work is consistent, in that like you're not having to suddenly like scale up and bring on potentially less experienced developers just because you're trying to get over a hump. You're trying to meet this really tight launch date or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, no matter where a person comes from, I mean, even with Commerce Hero, we try the best that we can, and we are specialized, which makes us unique. But like, whenever you're working with somebody new, there's a certain amount of risk that it's not going to work out for one reason or another. So if you can isolate as many variables as you can, you know, to kind of de-risk that trial relationship, I think that's the way to go. And like, the cool thing about retainer work too is that, you know, you could bring some, because I think the best way, and I like how you do this as well. The best way to find out if somebody's going to work, particularly as a subcontractor, is bring them on, have them do 10, 20, 30 hours, whatever it is, of actual work on an actual project, actual client project, and see how they do. And if you can bring them on to something that's low risk, like if they don't work out, it's not going to like tank the project. It's not going to tank the client. You can easily make up for it some way else. That's just a great way, because half the battle is like, how can you know, test out, you know, a relationship with a subcontractor without an extremely high risk. You're not gonna, it's gonna take a few tries before you're successfully able to start subcontracting. You're gonna have to figure that out on your end, like your management style, and then also like finding the right person. So being able to test it in sort of a safe, sort of a sandbox almost, is I think is good.
Definitely. And it helps, like you were saying, to not, if you've like already committed to some sort of huge project and you're trying out a developer for that, you're almost like in a sticky situation where it's like, man, I just like really need someone to help me out, because I suddenly have this 300-hour project that needs to get done. But if it's like, you know, 10 hours a week or something, then it's easier to try them out. And as you were saying, if it doesn't work out, it's like, all right, you can shift it over to another developer. Or, you know, in my case, sometimes if something doesn't work out with the developer, I just do it myself. And maybe I end up working a couple hours later, you know, for a couple days that week. And that helps kind of absorb some of the impact of,
right.
of that kind of thing.
And there's a big difference between having to work a couple of hours extra in a week versus like, oh shoot, I have to work an extra 30 hours this week
Yeah.
project, and now my work life is or my personal life is taking a dive. I'm not sleeping, and you know, so yeah, that's a really, it's, you gotta be smart about those things. Yeah, so picking clients, so email. So email, I remember we talked a little bit about this, about how you try to you know, just go that extra mile to kind of be positive in emails and stuff like that. So what's your thesis on email tone and stuff like that?
Oh yeah. That's something that kind of developed over the years. And when I started out, I mean, I'm kind of just a nerdy developer, and it's like, oh, I just want you to ask me to do something and I'll do it. So, you know, a client emails you, hey, can you do this? You respond, yes, I will do it. And then when you're done, you say, this is done. I mean,
right.
I think
period.
Right, exactly. That's like the normal developer response. And like some of the guys that work for me, like that's how they respond to me, which is fine. But like I kind of figured out after a while that like, I mean, particularly with commerce, one thing I love about it is that you're usually working with people on an ongoing basis. You're truly like developing a relationship. And I found that putting a little more enthusiasm and kind of excitement in the emails, I think it's just a more positive experience for everyone, because like you're doing your job, they're doing their job, and at the end of the day, you almost are like coworkers in some regard. And if you're working with a coworker that's always just really dry, it's not necessarily bringing you down, but it's not like building you up. So anything you can do, like if a client emails you and says, hey, can you do this? You'd be like, oh, yeah. That in the email, you say something like, totally, that sounds great, you know.
Exclamation point.
Exclamation point. Yeah, plenty of exclamation points. Thanks for sending this over, you know, those kinds of things. And when it's done, you're like John Davis jokes about our Natalico style. And instead of responding like, this is done, you say something like, hey, we just got this, you know, polished up on the staging site. Could you check it out? Let me know what you think, you know. Yeah. It's kind of little things. And I think so with a lot of developers, English isn't their first language either. So they're trying to communicate the information, and that's great. You obviously need to communicate the information, but anything you can do to really add a little additional like enthusiasm on top of that, really just it builds client rapport over time, and really makes it a much more enjoyable experience for, I think, for yourself and 100% for the client.
Yeah, it's funny how some of these things seem very small, and email sort of etiquette is a surprisingly big part of our lives, and those little details, I think, you know, make a difference. And you know, it's very easy for relationships to become tense, especially if there's other factors coming into play. Let's say you're behind schedule, or you know, whatever. Those little and I can't remember where I saw it. It's like, you know, it's like if you don't put an exclamation point, like you're being a jerk, you know, like it's just this, I don't know what it is. It's this weird, you know, like you replied to a tweet, you're like, thanks, exclamation point. And you're not like, in real life, you're not like super enthused, but it's just, it's, I don't know, if you don't do that, it feels like, like you're not, I don't know if that's an American thing, because like, you know, I guess with Germans or Europeans, it's like, if they say, have you ever heard like a German or something, if they say okay, or no, if they say it's fine, that means like literally it's fine. It means like it's good. But right. For us, if we say that's fine, it's like, okay, that's fine. It's like
that's acceptable. Like,
yeah, barely acceptable.
That'll do.
Yeah. And then like for Americans, it's like anything up to like, you know, 90% is like awesome. You know, anything from like it's 50% good to like 90% good is it's awesome. And like, you know, above that, it's like it's mind blowing. Whereas for like Germans, it's like fine covers like 50, you know, to 70. And like above that is like good, like 70 to 90 is good. And then like, you know, excellent is just reserved for the like the most extreme.
I wonder what Germans and other cultures, like how they would take kind of, I would say, my American enthusiasm. Would they take that as like annoying? Like this person just needs to calm down, or
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think so. And John said net style O copyright pending. I guess that's your brand guidelines.
That's our email style guide.
No, and it's kind of like I think it was MailChimp or a lot of companies have put out kind of like a brand guideline where what's the word for it? Is it brand guideline? Where and they made it public, but it's an internal document for employees for like this is the tone that we use in writing documentation. This is the tone and the style that we use in error messages. You know, MailChimp's error messages are really good. And
yeah, they're kind of funny sometimes.
Yeah, and just that little thing, like that little piece of polish makes a difference. And so yeah, and so like that's an interesting idea. Like I don't know if I've ever seen like a brand guideline around communicating with clients as an agency.
Yeah, you know, it's funny along those lines. Have you seen Gmail's new like auto suggest feature?
Yeah, it's hysterical sometimes.
Yeah, it's amazing though. Like it's started looking at like John and I's emails, and it's really like mimicking that like style. Like it'll be like, awesome, thanks for sending this over.
Oh,
That kind of thing.
so funny. That's so funny.
It's like I guess that's a real thing.
Yeah. And then oh yeah, John mentioned that the tone guide, like Buffer and MailChimp have that like a tone guide. And yeah, no, it's funny. It's and I noticed that when emailing you, like consistently, because you know, it's kind of a systematic thing to you where that's just one of those rules you've learned. And I just all of our interactions, I'm like, man, John's just always so like upbeat, you know, and it changes the way that you know, because certain people you're like, yeah, they're cool, but you know, there's not always that upbeat, you know. And you know, I think little things like that can make a difference.
Particularly on email, I think you have to kind of go above and beyond to express like emotion, and because otherwise it's very easy to just read emails very dryly. And just assume that there's no emotion. So whatever you can do to exclamation points, or I mean, I don't think John does this as much as I do, but like I use a lot of emojis and emoticons in work emails. Like I mean, maybe that's a generational thing, and also maybe it wouldn't translate culturally, but like I think that there's a lot of additional information that, particularly on email, that you would convey with your voice in some sort of like sarcastic tone or like joking voice. But like if you just put that in an email, like it can just totally come across the wrong way. Whereas it's like if you put a smiley face after something, you know,
throw a poop emoji in there or something. Yeah.
Servers down, poop.
It's funny because right, these things sound so silly, but it's I mean, emojis have become a huge part of the way people communicate, even in a business, well, in a laid back business context. Obviously, we're both in a fairly laid back business context. I mean, you've got certain business contexts where that wouldn't fly, but yeah, it's crazy how, you know, what a big part of internet culture and business culture those things have become. I remember, God, it must have been like 8 years ago. I was doing this website for this this guy. It was a Japanese dating site. This was before I got into Magento and stuff like that. And so it was he talked to us about the emojis, and this was before emojis became popular, right? Like 8 years ago, they were not at all. Nobody ever used them.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, in Japan, they're super into this. And I was like, this is the silliest thing in the world. Like, what? And it's just been funny to see how popular they've gotten.
Yeah, I think a big part of it too is like generational. More as kind of baby boomers age out of the workplace a little bit, and you know the next generation takes over. It's part of communication style, and I think like our generation is a lot more used to communicating by text versus voice. And I think you essentially have to evolve in finding ways to put some of that feeling back into text communication. Whereas an older generation would be like, well, obviously you just pick up the phone. And I have my own feelings about picking up the phone, as I'm sure you know.
Actually, that's a great topic. So how do you deal with clients wanting to get on the phone, managing phone calls? How do you deal with that?
That is a big thing early on that I try to help clients get very much in the habit of.
First phone call, you say, "Nice to meet you. Don't ever call me."
I mean, actually, literally, I've had introductions where I'm doing that warm introduction by another client. And they're like, "All right, Mark is great, but don't call him unless like the world is ending. Like, just don't do it." Like, you know. So I mean, that's one of those things where up front, I can say it, or you can start to imply things slowly. Like a client will suggest a phone call. And this, just to preface it, this is my personal style, and I could probably explain why I think the phone isn't as good. But I'll just say, like, the way I get clients to not call you as much is they'll be like, "Hey, can we set up a meeting to talk about this?" Or literally they'll just start calling me, and I'm just not going to answer my phone initially, and like say, "Hey, I saw that you called." Try to redirect them to email, because my philosophy on email over phone is that there's a lot. It's asynchronous versus synchronous communication, and there's a lot of things where it needs to be communicated to someone else, but it doesn't need to be communicated that second. So, you know, when you pick up the phone and you call someone, essentially you're saying, "Hey, drop everything you're doing and listen to this piece of information I need to give to you." And just from my perspective, as you know, like as a developer that's, you know, sometimes spends, you know, hours coding or something, if someone calls and they want to just communicate that little bit of information, it can really disrupt the flow of the development. And so being able to separate that out and say, "Hey, if you have a little piece of information that you need to communicate to me, email it to me." And then, you know, like you were saying, you only check, you know, at one point you were only checking your email like once a day or something like that. It allows you to let them know, "Hey, I am here. I will get the email. I will get what you sent to me," and then be able to follow up with it in a timely manner, you know. And that depending on what they're sending you, if it's an urgent thing, if urgent is in the subject line, then you know I need to respond to it quickly. If it's not urgent, then you prioritize it, and, you know, however you need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like people just need to sort of make their communication policy sort of clear and consistent, because, you know, for some people, email is like chat. Like they reply, bounce back and forth. They expect you to email them back 30 seconds later, and they're in their inbox. For other people, emails hit and miss. Like, I won't necessarily respond to your email. And some people make that explicit, and then most people don't. It's just like, "Oh yeah, I missed it, you know, inboxes, am I right?" You know, and it's like, I mean, there, to a certain extent, people sort of accept that most people are going to miss some emails, but then it's like, I don't know, like, how do you know which email you're going to miss? What if you miss the important one? So I think it's good to have some sort of a policy, whatever that is. So people, and then you just sort of have to kind of, like you do, like train people or reiterate, sort of encourage them to communicate the way you want them to. But so you don't like charge for phone calls or anything like that?
I don't charge for phone calls, except for the fact that, like, it's time. It's just working in time and materials all the time. It's essentially billed the same as any development, because, you know, when you're a small team of developers, then essentially when someone's talking to you on the phone for an hour, that's an hour of development that you're not doing. So, you know, from my perspective, it doesn't look any different.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, a lot of people don't feel comfortable billing for meetings, and I'll encourage people to do that. Like when I'm thinking of, a freelancer that was starting to do some freelance through Commerce Hero and hadn't done too much. And I'm like, hey, bill for your meetings, it's not like you're doing that for your health, like that's,
Right.
that's, unless you're having a meeting down there in Miami at the beach, maybe it is for your health.
You can mix social and
Right. But yeah, so basically, and then so if somebody says, hey, let's set up a meeting, I want to talk about this. Do you try to redirect them on that, or how do you handle that?
It really depends on the client. Part of it depends on how much a particular client has requested meetings or phone calls that month, and at times there's ways where I try to kind of throttle that, where it's like, all right, this client hasn't asked me to take a meeting in like a month. Like, okay, yeah, if he wants me to take a meeting, if it's like, you're getting an email every week, like, hey, can we set up a meeting? Hey, can we set up a meeting? Then it's like, hey, how can we communicate about this by email? Could you send me over the requirements? I'll take a look and let you know if I need any more information. A lot of times meeting requests, like I was saying, is basically them delivering you information. And it's like, we didn't necessarily need a phone call for that. So, if try to get them to send it over by email. And if that works, then great. If it's like the kind of thing where it sounds like you're going to be going back and forth, then you say, okay, let's set up a meeting to try to hash this out, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So let's see here. We have about 10, 15 minutes left. I know there's a couple of topics we want to get into. I think you want to talk about Shopify a little bit. And they are having a Shopify Unite, I think, is happening right now.
Yeah, that's like kind of their Magento Imagine, I think.
Yeah. So fitting time to talk about it. So previously you were just like pure Magento, if I recall. And I think you've just been starting to look at Shopify a little bit.
Yeah, I would say for about a year or two, I've essentially had Shopify as a service I can do. I've made a few tweaks to templates here and there, but I really wouldn't advise people on it to use it as a platform. But I've found within the past year, Shopify as a platform has grown, so I think that it can fit a lot more use cases. And I've been kind of wrestling with I wouldn't say issues with Magento per se, but more issues with how Magento over time can be customized. And I know a lot of agencies have experience, taking on a site that another agency customized, and the code isn't documented. There's like core hacks. There's all kinds of like bad practices that can be done to really I would say damage a Magento site. And one thing that I've seen, or I kind of thought I was seeing in Shopify, is, hey, here's a platform where it's a lot more restrictive. You can't customize it as much as Magento, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Some clients don't need quite as much customization. Some clients might get themselves in trouble if they have too much customization power. So I've kind of been looking at Shopify for a couple smaller clients to see how can this fit for them, and it's been good and it's been bad. I've also observed the more Shopify clients I've taken on that some of those customization issues that I thought were kind of inherent to the ability of Magento to just be fully customizable, or you can hack the core. Even without that kind of flexibility, you can still do a lot of damage in Shopify just using like their front end, what they call liquid theming engine. And I've taken on 3 different sites in the past month where the problem with the site is page load time, like time to first bytes. Like they're getting time to first bytes of like 10 seconds. Like it's horrible.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and so
all from a bunch of front end stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. While the front end seems like, oh, you're just customizing HTML and CSS, you're pulling in these variables that are essentially like hitting the back end in various ways. You just don't really have much visibility into that.
But you mean like full page load time? Because time to first byte would just be the server response time, right?
Yeah, no, I'm saying that the time to first byte can be as much as 10 seconds, and then the full page load, you know, on top of that, it's terrible, and a lot of developers, I think, aren't seeing that on Shopify because they're not familiar with the kind of front end caching that's being done.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously in Magento, it's the concept of caching is a lot more transparent. You've got lots of different caches in your full page cache. Shopify has their own kind of full page cache. I think they might even run some sort of varnish. And so once a page is like in the varnish cache, it's great, you know, 100 millisecond load times for time to first byte. But particularly if you have a site that's like changing a lot, so you know things are going in and out of stock, or like they're changing the product details, that essentially invalidates that full page cache, and then you see like the real behind the scenes performance of a particular page, and it can take, you know, 10 seconds because of just really bad code that's been put into those front end templates.
Wow, I had no idea. I never seen a Shopify server response time be that high. By the way, Alan mentioned big announcements today: multi-currency support and multi-inventory support, which is interesting because I remember hearing somebody tell me they were going to launch those almost like a year ago, and I think those two features are well, multi-store more broadly. So I don't know exactly how multi-currency and multi-inventory tie into that, but like I think multi-store generally is one of the biggest reasons, especially why bigger companies aren't using Shopify as much.
Yeah,
so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I've heard a few of the announcements earlier this morning, and I think Shopify as a platform will grow more features to, I would say, essentially like catch up to Magento, and I think that's great. But at the end of the day, you know, how much you can customize them, it can be a huge factor in whether a business says like I need the functionality in Magento, or Shopify can do what I need to do, or I can make it do what I need to do. And in those cases, like if you can make Shopify do what you need to do in, you know, an efficient, performant way, honestly, I'm like, go for it. It's a great ecosystem. You don't have to worry about hosting. There's a lot of advantages to it. But then if it just can't do it, then it just can't do it. It's, you know, you have business requirements, that kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. So and then for you as, you know, the agency who's getting retainer clients, and I don't know, maybe your average is 10 hours a month, 15, 20, whatever it is, and the type of work that you do with Magento, how is that shifting? So if a client, I assume maybe your clients are asking about Shopify, and so then you're looking into it, and like how, because the you know, probably the typical worry would be like, hey, there's not as much development work to do there because it's a SaaS, so like I'm not going to have as much work to do. How is that? How do you see that? Like how is your involvement with a typical client shifting when, you know, maybe they're moving to Shopify?
It's I see Shopify as a platform that I really, really try to enable the client to be a lot more independent. So from like an agency profitability standpoint, really those clients, they're not going to make as much money. They're not going to be as big of clients for us. But I guess in the long term, I figure the more that I can enable them to be self-reliant, the more that they can just make money, then kind of long term that will kind of shake out. And you know, as they grow, then they might have, you know, bigger requirements. They might need bigger customizations. But at kind of the basic level, really try to use Shopify in a way that's like that's not overly customized. And along with, you know, running into these templates with like, you know, big time to first byte page loads, there's also, if you over customize the front end template, a lot of the Shopify apps just don't plug in right because they're expecting certain things to be in certain places, or be coded in certain ways. So I'm really like advising clients to not over customize the front end like look and feel. Like obviously you want to put in your branding, your colors, your logo, but I've gotten a few clients who they had another developer build them, you know, a custom Shopify template. They spent $10,000 to $15,000 on a totally customizable front end, but now they're trying to plug in Shopify apps and they're not working. They're basically having the same issues that a lot of
Magento clients have. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm telling, they're like, well, you know, what do we need to do? How do we need to rewrite this template to be more flexible? And I'm like, what I think you need to do is throw this template in the garbage and and use a base Shopify template from either, you know, Shopify has a couple of their own themes, and then there's like a Shopify theme store of like their partners that have built themes that are much more in line with how the platform expects things to be. And it's like, well, what if I want to customize it to this and this? And you really have to say like every customization that you're doing outside of the box of those templates, like you're putting yourself at risk in the future for causing more headache. And you're making the more you pay a developer to customize Shopify, I would say the more you're ultimately going to have to pay a developer long term to keep maintaining it, because you install this and then it doesn't work, and then they have to customize it. And it really bothers me in those cases, because I really feel like those clients like might as well have been on Magento if you're going to do that kind of thing.
That's interesting. I didn't realize the extent to which that type of thing was an issue. I knew that, you know, you could have conflicts between extensions and a whole lot of stuff happening in JavaScript. But I wouldn't have imagined that, you know, a client would drop 15 grand on a template and then it would essentially need to be just dropped. That's so how many of your clients have moved to Shopify?
Only a handful. I think I've migrated like 2 people from Magento to Shopify, and I've migrated 1 person like from Shopify to Magento. So it's not a huge like influx of work. It's more something I'm really trying to stay like connected and relevant in commerce in general, and really try to understand the platform so that at the end of the day I can make sure that I'm putting on clients on the platform that's best for them, not like what makes me bill the most hours. Yeah.
By the way, Alan said bad code is bad code no matter the platform, which
true.
Totally makes sense. And I like the way you're approaching this. I remember when you first started talking to me about looking at Shopify, and I've been seeing you digging into it and stuff, some of your tweets, and it's kind of the same approach that you use with other things, just slowly, gradually picking it up before you take on some huge project and getting familiar with it so that, you know, you can take care of your clients' needs. And I think that's happening in some way to everybody in the industry. I mean, I've had people tell me like Shopify Plus, there's a lot of demand for talent. And similar to what you said around analogies between Shopify problems and Magento problems, what I've heard is that finding people that really know the backend APIs in depth to build like high scale integrations is just about as hard, or maybe even harder, than finding really good Magento talent. So yeah, I mean, I haven't gotten too deep into it, but you know, everybody's diversifying a little bit.
Yeah, it's a different, I think, paradigm as well, because particularly the back-end integrations of Shopify are very API based. So ultimately, you could, if you want to build a back-end integration, you can kind of build it in whatever language you want, and you're plugging into it more like a microservice, which I think there's a bit of that going on in Magento as well. You know, things like TaxJar, Shipper HQ, where SaaS platforms are connecting to other SaaS platforms. And I think that Shopify is a big example of that. I mean, it in of itself is a SaaS platform. And then so many of the integrations rely on something else, like, you know, Klaviyo, email marketing. I think
MageMail,
that's a good one. Does MageMail support Shopify?
No, actually, I think that they're I think that they're wanting to actually. I don't know if it does yet, but I
Yeah.
think that's in the roadmap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sadly. Sadly.
So it's a little ironic. It'd be like Magento like starting to do Shopify development.
Right, right.
It's a little confusing.
Well, we're about at our time. I know we didn't
Yeah.
talk about the whole dog fooding topic. Real briefly, you were like, "Man, I should put up my own store because I'm trying to help my clients that put up their stores." So that was kind of the
Yeah.
impetus for the Mage Talk swag store that you helped with.
I'm wearing
All
a
of the,
shirt.
yeah. Oh, you are you? Oh God, I'm not even. That's awesome.
How
The
dare you?
soupy, the soupy. It's so weird with this hangout because I have to look at the camera and start looking. That's awesome. The soupy shirt. I ordered a shirt. It's not going to get here until like Thursday, I think. But yeah, so all of the good shirt ideas on the Mage Talk swag store are your ideas, and
All the
so
people's faces are your ideas.
yeah, I brought the people's faces, and you brought the shirts. It was a good combination of talents.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, the dog fooding thing does kind of plug a little into the Shopify exploration, and me thinking personally, like, oh, if I was just getting started on e-commerce, I might start with Shopify because out of the box you can kind of get
oh
from
yeah, for sure.
zero to accepting payments, and just literally a couple minutes, which is awesome. And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs that are really kind of trying out a new product. It basically lets you put up an MVP in just a few hours of work, and you don't need to hire anyone else. So I think that's really awesome. But I mean, the whole point of the dog fooding was to try to understand, one, how someone starting out would go, but then the other side of it is trying to kind of empathize and understand more where my clients are coming from, and like what would they do? Would some of them be better on Shopify, or would some of them hit Shopify and be like, why can't it do this? Why can't you make it do this? It's just really trying to understand how they feel, and then approach the whole process of going from like having a product to selling it online, and what are the struggles outside of just writing code and putting the website up. What else do you have to deal with, like all these celebrity people that you want to take photos of your shirts. How hard is it to message?
Like as the developer, you think of the content, photos, copy as just like the dumb stuff. Like, okay, just go plug that in. I built this beautiful site for you. I did all the backend integrations. Now go plug in the copy. And then when you're actually doing it, it's like so hard. Like you're trying to get people to take photos. You're trying to ship things to people. Your logistics, and it's like it's like soul destroying. It's just so difficult. So I definitely have a little more empathy for that as well.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, like, can you imagine if we were doing, instead of Teespring, that we were manufacturing the shirts and trying to manage inventory and kind of ship it out and stuff? I mean, we've already taken a shortcut by using this, like,
Teespring
on demand.
Yeah, we've taken a massive shortcut, and we're still just barely above water. But I guess we got Dooley Thavanka joined, and he asked if he could ask a question. So if he can slide that in here, we'll get that last question in. But then John says he'd quit. If he can slide that question in, we'll get that in. But if not, we'll call it a wrap. But anything else, Mark, that where can people find you? Anything you want to plug? Any last words?
Mostly, yeah, I want to plug the Mage Talk swag store. You can get these sweet soupy t-shirts here.
Soupy.
But oh yeah, I mean, I'm not really here, I guess, for self-promotional reasons. It's more just if you're a developer, I would say, and you kind of have questions about the whole process of like, hey, I'm working with clients and I have this struggle working with a client, like, reach out to me. I know you've talked about like mentorship, and I don't have anything like formal or anything, but like I would love to help developers that are basically trying to become independent and are trying to like do good work for clients, but trying to also like navigate the struggles of being independent and dealing with clients. Because I really empathize with the kind of shy developer that just wants to write the code, and then when you have to interface with clients, it's a whole nother ballgame.
Yeah. No, that's really good. And actually, for Duleep's question, why don't I point him to ping you? He's a good dude. Actually, we've connected online, and his question was the best way to estimate a Magento project. We've talked a little bit about that, but maybe Duleep can just ping you on Twitter or whatever, and he does some freelance work and stuff. So maybe you could give him some tips on that.
Definitely.
And with that, we'll go ahead and call it a wrap. Thanks everybody for joining. We'll be doing Mage Talk Live tomorrow, so be sure to check that out. And Mark, thanks so much for joining. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Finally get this going. Enjoy the beach. Don't enjoy too much, man. You're gonna make us all jealous.
Sorry. I mean, it's getting hot.
Okay. Is it really humid out there?
It's pretty humid. It's probably like 70% humidity.
Oh, okay.
I'm sweating.
Wow. Okay. All right, man. See you.
See ya.